Hello, viewers. Welcome back to a very new episode from our channel. We have been trying to make our videos interactive by adding some schematic representations. And this time, there is more. We hope you like it. Let's begin. In our previous class, we have already discussed the structure of a long bone. We also had a glimpse of various types of ossification. In today's episode, we'll discuss about the histology of the bone and the ossification in a little more detail. As already discussed in your previous episodes, the bone is a form of specialized connective tissue which is highly vascular and consists of osteocytes, collagen fibers, and a mineralized ground substance. While describing the structure of a long bone, we saw that the cortical and the cancellous parts were present towards the shaft and the ends, respectively. Now let us move a step further and see the histology or the microstructure of these two parts.
Welcome to Anatomy Weekly.
When we look at the histology of an adult bone, we see that it is made up of lamellae and can be classified histologically as the lamellar bone. Now, what is a lamellae or a lamellar bone? Lamellae, in simple words, is a layer made up of thin plate of bones which consist of collagen fibers and a gelatinous ground substance, both of which is mineralized with salts like calcium and phosphorus.
Now let us try to understand how the lamellar pattern is created. If we look at an individual lamellae, we can see that the collagen fibers are laid down parallel to each other. When fresh collagen fibers are laid down next to it, the angles at which they are running are at varying degree to the first one. This creates a new architectural pattern and hence it gives rise to a separate lamellae. The mineralization follows the very same pattern as the collagen fibers. The whole process of laying collagen and the mineralization is initiated by the then functioning bone cells called the osteoblasts. If you look at the process of mineralization in this video, we can see some osteoblast here which lies in between the adjacent lamellae. These osteoblasts are responsible for the whole process of mineralization. Once the lamellae are mineralized, the osteoblasts gets themselves trapped in between the newly formed bony lamellae, and once trapped, the osteoblasts are known as the osteocytes. Again, if you look at the video, here you can see some delicate processes coming out of the osteocytes. These are the cytoplasmic processes of the osteocytes through which they exchange nutrients. The mineralization creates spaces for the individual osteocytes as well as their cytoplasmic processes. Both these spaces lie between the adjoining lamellae. These individual spaces for osteocytes are called the lacunae, and the fine spaces for their cytoplasmic processes are called the canaliculi.
Histologically, another form of bone is the woven bone. Unlike the mature bone, a newly formed bone does not have a lamellar pattern. Here, the collagen fibers are found in bundles that run randomly in different directions, interlacing with each other. This gives a woven appearance to the bony tissue, and thus it is called a woven bone. A newly formed bone is always a woven bone and is replaced by a lamellar pattern at a later period. Therefore, according to the histology, the bone can be classified as the woven bone and the lamellar bone. This classification, according to the histology, into lamellar and woven bone should be added to the overall classification of bones that we had already discussed in our previous class.
So by now we know the histological classification of bone, and if you have gone through our last week's video, you know that the bone can be classified according to the structure into a compact or a cortical bone and a spongy or cancellous or the trabecular bone. Let us discuss the histology of both these types. Starting with the histology of a cancellous bone, we know that the cancellous or the spongy bone is present in the epiphysis, most part of the metaphysis, and some part of the diaphysis. To have some more details about the histology or the microstructure, we have to see the architecture of a cancellous bone. Here, if we look at a cancellous bone under the microscope, we can see some bony plates called the trabeculae. These bony trabeculae border some white spaces which mostly contains the bone marrow. The bone marrow present in these spaces provide nutrition to these bony trabeculae. If we look closer, it can be seen that each of these trabecular plate is further made up of a number of lamellae, with the spaces called the lacunae and the canaliculae. And by now you know that the lacunae is occupied by the osteocytes and the canaliculae will be occupied by their cytoplasmic processes.
Now let us discuss the microstructure of a compact bone. Like the cancellous bone, the compact bone is also made up of the lamellae, but here the pattern is a little different. The bony lamellae here are arranged in the form of concentric rings. We can relate it to the stem of a banana tree, which is cut and shows a very similar concentric architecture. The concentric lamellae of the compact bone surrounds a central canal called the Haversian canal. The Haversian canal is occupied by blood vessels, nerve fibers, and some cells. The osteocytes will be occupying the spaces between the adjacent lamellae, a pattern very similar to the cancellous bone. One Haversian canal and the lamellae around it constitute a Haversian system or an osteon. Don't get confused with the terms osteon and osteoid. While osteon is a typical Haversian system with the canal and the concentric lamellae, osteoid is the inorganic matrix, that is, collagen fibers and gelatinous ground substance of a bone before mineralization. The Haversian canal with the whole typical Haversian system run parallel to the length of the bone. A compact bone is having numerous osteons or Haversian systems.
Now, let us try to identify the structures over here present in this three-dimensional histology of a compact bone. Over here, you can see there are so many Haversian systems with a central Haversian canal, and by the side of it there you can find the concentric lamellae. Now, in between the lamellae, you can see there are spaces which are known as the lacunae, and these are meant for the osteocytes. By the side of the lacunae, you can see some delicate spaces again, which are known as the canaliculi, and they are meant for the cytoplasmic processes of these osteocytes. Now, if you look at the side view, the Haversian system, you can see the Haversian canal and the vessels which are running parallel to the long axis of a compact bone. Try to identify these vessels, as well as you see these vessels, they are getting anastomosed with each other through some canals. Now, these canals are known as canals of Volkmann's. If you look at the adjacent Haversian system, there are angular intervals where the circumferential lamellar pattern is absent. These bony lamellae are called the interstitial lamellae. These are a part of circumferential lamellae which was destroyed earlier during the remodeling. If you see the lamella near the surface, it shows a pattern where the lamellas are arranged parallel to the surface. These lamella are called the circumferential lamella. As it can be seen that the Haversian system run parallel to the length of the bone, the vessels and the nerves inside the Haversian canal branch and anastomose with each other. These canals also communicate with each other to the marrow cavity and to the external bony surface through the canals that are called the canals of Volkmann. Here you can see how an actual dry bone preparation looks like under a microscope. Try to identify the Haversian canal, the concentric lamellae, the osteocytes, the interstitial lamellae, as well as the Volkmann's canal. The same can be represented as a schematic picture where we can again identify the Haversian canal, the concentric lamellae, and the osteocytes. We hope by now you have an idea about the histology of a cancellous and a compact bone.
Before going into ossification, it is very important to understand what the bone is made up of. First, let us talk about the bone cells. The cells of the bone are osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes, osteoclasts, and the bone lining cells. Let's get a little familiar with these cells. The mesenchymal stem cells give rise to the osteogenic cells or the osteoprogenitor cells. These cells are a specialized form of stem cells meant for bone formation, and they act as reservoirs during bone growth and repair. In fetus, these cells are numerous at the site of bone formation, while in adults, they are present on both the periosteal and the endosteal surfaces. The osteoprogenitor cells transform themselves into osteoblasts. The osteoblasts are immature form of osteocytes. They are found lining the growing surface of the bone. Over the growing surfaces, they look like the lining cells or the epithelium. But on a closer look, they can be seen as cells of various shapes with gaps in between. The individual osteoblasts can be seen connecting with each other through numerous slender cytoplasmic processes radiating from each cell. Since the osteoblasts are cells that are engaged in considerable bone synthesis, they can be identified as cells with a basophilic cytoplasm and an euchromatic nucleus. The osteoblasts are responsible for forming the collagen fibers, laying down the matrix of bony tissue as well as calcification of the bony matrix. The cell membranes of osteoblasts contains the enzyme alkaline phosphatase, which plays an important role in laying down the calcified matrix. The osteoblasts later transform into osteocytes, which are the mature bone cells. As compared to the osteoblasts, the osteocytes are metabolically less active, but they still have a role in deposition or resorption of the calcified matrix whenever required. The osteoclasts are the bone removing cells. They are very large in comparison to the other bone cells. They can have up to 20 nuclei. It was seen recently that the osteoclasts are derived from the white blood cells called monocytes. The multiple nucleus in the osteoclasts may be a result of fusion of many monocytes. Removal of bone by osteoclasts involves demineralization and removal of matrix. Thus, they are found in the areas where there is a need for bone removal, like the areas for bone remodeling. Apart from these mentioned cells, a few cells can be seen lining the bones in the periosteal and endosteal surfaces, the bony cavities and spaces. These cells appear as flat cells which can possibly give rise to osteoblasts. These are called the bone lining cells.
The cells of the bony tissue lie separated from each other by the bony matrix. Now let us see what it is made up of. The bony matrix can be divided into the organic matrix and the inorganic matrix. About 35% of the dry weight of bone is accounted for by the organic ground substance and collagen fibers and 65% by the inorganic salts. The organic matrix composes of ground substance in which collagen fibers are embedded. The ground substance consists of glycosaminoglycans, proteoglycans, and water. Two special glycoproteins, osteonectin and osteocalcin, are present in large quantity. Many a time referred as osteoid collagen, the collagen fibers are very similar to those found in general connective tissue. The collagen present here is the type 1 collagen fiber. These ground substances bind readily to the calcium ions and therefore play an important role in mineralization of the bone. Together, the organic matrix and the collagen fibers are many a times referred to as osteoid. The inorganic matrix consists predominantly of calcium and phosphorus. Other ions like magnesium, carbonate, hydroxyl, chloride, fluoride, citrate, sodium, and potassium are also present in significant amounts. Most of the calcium, phosphate, and hydroxyl ions are in the form of needle-shaped crystals that are given the name hydroxyapatite. Remember, Minerals present in a bone are not fixed but dynamic. That is, their levels vary as per the calcium intake and the body requirements and is regulated by hormones like parathyroid and calcitonin.
You must be having some idea about the ossification by now, which we have already discussed in our previous class. Let's dig in to some more details. First, let us consider membranous ossification. Mesenchymal cells become densely packed at the site for future membranous bone. Now, some of the mesenchymal cells enlarge to form osteoblasts. These osteoblasts lay down the collagen fibers. This gives rise to a membrane for future bone development. The osteoblasts secrete a gelatinous ground substance in which the fibers get embedded. These fibers can no longer be seen distinctly. This mass of swollen fibers and matrix is called osteoid. Under the influence of osteoblasts, calcium salts are deposited in the osteoid. As soon as this happens, the layer of osteoid can be said to have formed one bony lamellae. Now let us look at the same thing from another perspective to better understand how the lamellae are formed layer after layer. Initially, the first layer of osteoid is laid down by the osteoblasts. When the mineralization begins, some of the osteoblasts move away and lie adjacent to this layer. As mineralization continues, some of them gets caught within the lamellae. The trapped osteoblast transforms into osteocytes. The osteoid is now ossified to form the first lamellus. The osteoblasts which escaped will now form the next lamellae in a similar way. The osteocytes will finally lie in between adjacent lamellae. In this way, a number of lamellae are laid down one over the other, and these lamellae together form a trabeculus of bone. In this way, a typical cancellous bone will be formed. An important point to keep in mind here is that the first formed bone may not be in the form of regularly arranged lamellae. The elements are irregularly arranged and form a woven bone. Let us now move on to enchondral ossification. In enchondral ossification, the mesenchymal cells become closely packed to form a mesenchymal condensation at the site for future bone development. Some of these mesenchymal cells become chondroblasts and lay down hyaline cartilage. The very same mesenchymal cells on the surface of the cartilage forms a membrane called the perichondrium. The cells of the cartilage are at first small and irregularly arranged. However, in the area where bone formation is to begin, the cells become vacuolated and enlarge considerably. The intercellular substance between the enlarged cartilage cells become calcified under the influence of alkaline phosphatase, which is secreted by the cartilage cells. The nutrition to the cells are thus cut off and they die, leaving behind empty spaces called primary areolae. At the same time, the perichondrium at the diaphysis becomes vascular and the vessels brings along with them the osteoprogenitor cells. These cells give rise to osteoblasts, and when this happens, the perichondrium can be called a periosteum. The point of entry of the vessel can be called a periosteal bud. The osteoblasts form a deposition of bony tissue around it through intramembranous ossification. This is called the bone collar. The bone collar obstructs the nutrition of the hypertrophied chondrocytes, causing more cell death. The osteoprogenitor cells from the periosteal bud eats away the walls of the primary areolae, thus creating large cavities called secondary areolae. The walls of the secondary areolae are formed by thin plates of calcified matrix that have not dissolved. To have a better view, let us look closer. The osteoprogenitor cells become osteoblasts and arrange themselves along the surface of these plates. These osteoblasts now lay down a layer of osteoid, very similar to the intramembranous ossification. The osteoid is calcified and a lamellus of bone is thus formed. Osteoblasts now lay down another layer of osteoid over the first lamellus, which is calcified. Thus, two lamellae of bone are formed. The osteoblasts get caught between the two lamellae and become osteocytes, in a way very similar to the membranous ossification. At this stage, the ossifying cartilage shows a central region where the bone has been formed. As we move away from this area, we see a region where the cartilaginous matrix has been calcified and surrounds dead and dying cartilage cells. Above it, we can see another zone of hypertrophied cartilage cells in an uncalcified matrix. Lastly, we can see a zone of normal cartilage in which there is considerable mitotic activity. This arrangement is being schematically depicted in this diagram. Here, the zone 1 shown in yellow is the zone of bone formation. The zone 2 shown in blue is the zone of calcified matrix. The zone 3 in green is the zone of hypertrophied cartilage cells, and the zone 4 that is shown in pink is the normal cartilage cells. Notice that above all these zones is the layer of mesenchyme. So the mesenchymal cells are still present in the area towards the ends of the bones. Now, during the bone growth, the zone 1 expands to occupy the zone 2. How does this happen? So during this process, the calcified matrix present in zone 2 is replaced by bone. So we can say the area which was originally occupied by both zone 1 and zone 2 is now being occupied only by zone 1. Simultaneously, the cells present in zone 3, that is the hypertrophied cartilage cells, they will die and the matrix will be calcified. So the zone 3 has now transformed into a zone of calcified matrix or zone 2. As this happens, the normal cartilage cells in zone 4, they will be swollen up, they will be hypertrophied to form the layer of hypertrophied cartilage. That means the zone 4 area has now transformed into a zone 3 area. The mesenchymal cells just adjacent to the zone of normal cartilage will now transform into normal cartilage cells. That means they have now transformed into zone 4. This process will continue until the whole of the mesenchymal framework will be transformed into cartilage and then replaced by bone. But a thin plate of epiphyseal cartilage will remain behind until the epiphysis and the diaphysis fuses, leaving behind an epiphyseal line. To understand more about epiphysis, diaphysis, epiphyseal plate of cartilage and the epiphyseal line, you can refer to our previous video. If we keep two separate phases of the bone growth side by side and compare the zones with each other, we can easily understand how the bone is growing and how different zones are transforming into the adjacent zones. In our next episode, we'll be talking about the development of a cancellous bone into a compact bone and a very few but important points regarding bone growth. We'll see you next time. Thank you.